My guest today is Gaba, who is a licensed psychotherapist and life coach who helps people cope with codependency, love addiction, toxic relationships, and mental health issues. In today's episode, we talk about one of her highly endorsed programs, Wake Up Recovery, an online group coaching program that applies the principles of positive psychology, law of attraction, and mindfulness for codependents, love addicts, and toxic relationships. Welcome to LIFEOLOgy.
Oh, welcome. Thank you for having me.
I am really looking forward to this. It's always so much fun to talk to another psychotherapist, and we get to hear all your expertise, and I know I'm going to learn so much. So it's so funny because when your publicist sent me the information, I was like, toxic relationships, everybody's had one of those in their life. And so I was like, I want to hear about this because I'm sure I've had many of those, and maybe I've had more than my life than I realized. And so definitely you're going to explain to us what all of that means.
Absolutely.
Now, you weren't always this person with whom I'm speaking with today, this expert in this. You went through a lot of life struggles yourself. Can you tell us some of that? Because it's so important. I think people realize that just because we're on this side of the camera, on this side of the mic, that we also had life lessons to learn as well. Walk us through that.
Okay. So you're so right. And a lot of therapists are very, they have really strict boundaries. They don't talk about their personal life. I feel sometimes it can be very helpful. So I kind of break a little bit of that rule, where I think, knowing that someone else has been through that, even if you're a therapist, can be really helpful and you feel like you can relate. So I started out going back to school in my mid-30s. I ended up somehow in the field of addiction. I ended up marrying an alcoholic. And what I found myself doing was really obsessing over his sobriety. And in many ways, that was a very toxic relationship because it was such a cycle of getting sober, not getting sober, sober, drinking, sober, using, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of woke up one day after his last relapse and I went, oh my God, I am obsessing over him. This is ridiculous. And I'm writing books. My first book was about alcoholism and the law of attraction, I thought. And I'm even writing books about him. I'm not an addict. I'm not an alcoholic, but here I am, so focused. Yeah. So I basically woke up one day and I went, I'm a love addict. I'm a codependent. I really have to unpack this and really look at why do I keep making these decisions with the same type of people over and over again? What's really going on? And so I did this personal journey and really looked at my early trauma. And so I'm a big believer if you have early trauma, there's a really good chance you may end up as a codependent, a love addict, or in a toxic relationship. And you really want to work on that trauma piece.
Yeah. And that's very true. I mean, I think the templates of life, you can really instill us today. So it's so funny because sometimes when I think of different things in my own life, if I hear myself repeat things I said about myself when I was a kid, for example, if I do something silly or foolish, I'm like, James, you're so stupid. If I were ever to say those types of things, those core beliefs really permeate our life and we're not aware of it, then I'm sure it can show up in relationships. I'm sure it can show up in the people we were attracted to. And that just replays the cycle of what we believed as kids is now who we are today.
And not only limiting beliefs, but specifically, not having parents that were available, not having caregivers that were there for us, possibly neglectful, possibly being abandoned, possibly being abused. This is severe trauma. So it's beyond limiting beliefs. It's actually energetically you are holding trauma in your body, and you're going to go out there and you're going to repeat those adult relationships if you don't work on those issues, because we all want what we know. We want what's familiar.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
it's always funny to me when people talk about relationships, like, oh, this is my type. And I'm like, but you don't have the successful relationship. Why is that your type? So it's so important to kind of rethink that. If someone is saying this is my type, well, maybe that shouldn't be your type. If
it's really familiar, you might want to be looking the other way for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So you had a few more life events that caused you to really reflect on this and change that. So as you looked at all the people that you were with in the relationships, you found that there was perhaps a theme there for you, but how did you break that for yourself? And then we'll jump into your expertise as well. But how were you able to break that for yourself?
Well, after that last relapse, I finally got divorced and I joined some support groups, 12-step groups. I formed my own group eventually based on love addiction and codependency. And I got a great trauma therapist. I actually learned the techniques as a psychotherapist to do somatic work with my clients. And that was really one of the best decisions I ever made. I spent some time on my own. I decided, I just keep going from one relationship to the next. I need some time to just process all of this. So I joined outrigger canoeing. I live out here in California, so I would go and jump in the water once a week with my friends in a an outrigger canoe, and it made me just feel so good and so alive.
Mm.
And I realized, I could be on my own. So it was very important for me to do this. And I was already in my my early 50s when I did this. So it was just a great opportunity to find myself.
That's fantastic. And you've obviously done incredibly well. You were on Celebrity Rehab as one of the psychotherapists, and you've done so many things. I was reading your backstory. You have a really great rap sheet when it comes to all the things you've done. So you don't need this from me, but I'm just so inspired in the fact that you overcame so many things. You took what was a stumbling block, turned it into a stepping stone, and now you're helping so many people. So
I
once
did.
again,
I really did. I
I
sometimes forget that, I forget to look at the success I've had. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of therapists get into this work to sort of help heal themselves, but it's really great when you can take that healing and work on yourself and heal others. It's a great gift.
It really is. It truly is. I want to jump into just toxicity, love relationships, etc. You talk about love addicts. What is a love addict?
So we know what a drug addict is. We know what an alcoholic is. They have a substance abuse, but love addicts are a little different. They do have an addiction, but it's to love and romance. They say addicts and alcoholics are always chasing that first high. Love addicts are always chasing that first love. They're looking for that euphoric state that love had brought them, and they just keep looking for it. But they have a lot of the same similarities as an addict in that there's a withdrawal state. If a breakup occurs, they're longing for that attachment to those pleasurable feelings they had when they fell in love. They often will over-adapt to what others want because they so don't want to be alone. They'll settle for less. They feel so empty, and they really just cannot be on their own. They have severe abandonment issues, which is what my story was. They attempt to change others. They need others to feel whole. They look for others. Codependency sort of ties into this. They look for others to feel whole. They want to feel needed. And they just give up who they are out of the fear that they might lose someone's approval or somebody might walk away from them. And so that's why when I talk about love addiction, I often also talk about toxic relationships, because you're going to be more vulnerable to a toxic relationship if you're someone that has a love addiction or codependent background.
And that's interesting. So transition into toxic relationships, what would be the I guess the symptoms of that or the signs of that? Because I'm sure everybody, because I'm sure people listening right now are like, oh, wait a minute, I've done some of those things when it comes to the love addiction aspect of it, overly identifying with the person you're with. And all of a sudden that becomes, the person you are when it's not really the person you truly are. What would be some of the signs of that?
Yeah, if you're constantly worrying about the partner, you're constantly obsessing about them, ruminating over them, you're always walking on eggshells, there's a lot of fighting, a lot of high intensity, you feel guilty for everything, because toxic people, and I'll say narcissists or those with narcissistic traits, they always have to be right. So you're wrong. And because you already have sort of a weak self-esteem, I don't want to say weak, but a low self-esteem, you're going to be more prone to taking on the guilt. You're going to take the blame. And they know that. There's a lot of fighting, a lot of manipulating, a lot of controlling, a lot of yelling, a lot of insulting. It can get into physical injuries, a lot of disrespect, a lot of devaluing, dishonesty, betrayal. And most importantly, if you find yourself just lacking care, you're so obsessed with this person that you're not taking care of yourself. You're not taking care of your appearance. You're neglecting your mental health, your physical health. These are all signs that you're probably in a toxic situation.
Yeah, I can, we often see this on TV, when we're like, oh my gosh, that's obvious. Of course, this person is in a toxic relationship. How does it creep up on people when they don't even realize it until one day, perhaps like yourself, you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? How is it that sometimes we normalize that so much that we don't even realize that we are in a toxic relationship?
Well, first of all, again, we attract what we know. So you'll end up with somebody that reminds you of something early on in your life, and you're gonna keep picking these people until you get it right. In other words, you get your childhood right. It's sort of a way to redo your childhood, and we can get into the trauma piece. But one of the telltale signs is love bombing. If you meet somebody that's just over the top, giving you attention, lavishing you with gifts, telling you how amazing you are. I had a guy last year tell me he was going to marry me on our first date, which was just ridiculous. These are some of the signs, you're going to say this guy could be toxic. They tell you they love everything about you. They've never met anyone as perfect as you. They want a commitment right away. They tell you you were born together. It's fate. You understand me more than anyone. We're soulmates. They quickly, again, want to be in a commitment. And the real telltale sign is they don't like boundaries. So as soon as you start to set a boundary, they're going to be like, no, they're not going to have it. You're probably dealing with a toxic person. Love bombers, I think your question was, how do you know? Well, this is how you know that someone is love bombing you. And they get really upset when you try to set a boundary, because someone who really respects you is going to respect your boundaries.
Yes. And that's one of the things I think sometimes people forget is the boundaries. And so there's a difference between setting healthy boundaries and unrealistic boundaries. Can people really differentiate between what is a realistic boundary and an unhealthy boundary?
I mean, it's really your line in the sand. It's where, what is no and what is yes, what is acceptable. No, I won't let somebody talk to me that way. No, I won't someone cheat. No, I won't. I won't allow somebody. I don't want to be with someone who's not in recovery for addiction or alcoholism. I'm not going to let someone yell at me or verbally abuse me. I mean, it's really figuring out what are your preferences. And like I said, codependent and love addicts often come from this history of trauma. And so they sometimes don't even know who they are. And if they don't know who they are, how can they know their preferences? And if they don't know their preferences, how can they know their boundaries? So that's why it's so important to do this healing work, finding a therapist that can help you really uncover, like, who am I? What is my line in my sand? What are my boundaries?
Yeah. And I think that's something, hearing this, I'm sure people will be like, oh my God, that's so much work. And that feels overwhelming. It feels daunting. What are things you tell people who may have those feelings of, my gosh, this is too overwhelming to have to work on this?
You have to sit in the pain. If you don't want to sit in the pain, you're just going to keep repeating the patterns. I mean, listen, you can do what I did and you can settle for less and then just end up in another divorce. I mean, I talk about this in my book, Love Smack, which is on Amazon. And it's all, I've had multiple marriages. I mean, if you can't sit with yourself, if you don't like your own company, if you haven't worked on your self-esteem, if you haven't unearthed early trauma, if you haven't dealt with family of origin issues, you'll just, and you're willing to just be abused, be a doormat, settle for less, become obsessed over somebody else, trying to fix, manipulate, or control someone to be who you want them to be rather than who they really are. You are welcome to do that, but it'll just be one painful event after the next. So really the best thing I can say is yes. I mean, I can't make it easy for you. It is a lot of work, but it is so great when you get to the other side and you start picking healthy relationships.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. One thing I'm thinking as well is what about those individuals like, I am healthy, but when they're dating someone, they're more in love with the person's potential as opposed to the reality of who the person is today.
Right. So codependent love addicts are notorious for loving the delusion of who someone is rather than who they are.
Sure.
Why is that? Because if they go into denial or they minimize the problems, because if they have to look at the truth, they'll have to actually either break up with the person or leave the relationship or have some kind of confrontation with the person. I mean, generally that person's not going to change, but it's because you don't want to be alone. You don't want to be abandoned. You don't want to be rejected. So you fall for something that you hope someone's going to be or who you think they are. And it's basically falling in love with a fantasy.
Yeah, which is unfortunately something that, that happens to many people. I was thinking just in general about when it comes to the media. I mean, obviously I'm in media, so I can't say much, but media often portrays a lot of those things as far as it normalizes unhealthy patterns. You're like, oh, this is really cute, or this is endearing. What would you say about a lot of the stereotypes or the archetypes that the media in general, once again, I'm part of that, but what would you say about that as far as how can people differentiate what's truly healthy as opposed to using the narratives or the archetypes that the media says?
Well, I'm thinking, those Fatal Attraction, which I'm already aging myself when you think of that movie, or Beyonce was in a movie called Obsessed. I mean, that's definitely the archetype of, falling in love instantly and obsessive love. I think music is a country music in particular, very codependent, very love addicted type music. But really, I have a granddaughter, she's going to be 6. And I think about all the princesses, I think of Snow White and Cinderella, and then even some of the princesses from my daughter's generation, Ariel or Beauty and the Beast. However, today, the princesses are starting to be a little more independent, like Moana, or, if anybody has kids or grandkids.
Yeah, I know what that is, yeah.
They're becoming a little more independent, luckily, thank goodness. But generally, it's this fairy tale idea that someone's going to rescue you, sweep you off your feet, and make everything, great. And it doesn't always work that way, but it's great to have secure love, move towards a secure attachment with someone, but it has to start with a secure attachment with yourself.
Yeah. And speaking of attachments, so obviously I know about attachment theories. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think it's so important for people to realize the avoidant attachment, just the types of attachments in general, because when we can put a name to something, that's when we're like, okay, that makes more sense. Do you want to talk a little bit about the attachment aspects of it? It doesn't have to go into the technical names of it, but just the concepts of it.
Well, there's the anxious attachment, secure attachment, disorganized attachment. I don't know if I'm missing any. I think those are the three I can.
That's fine.
Oh, and there's the avoidant.
Yeah, and
I think I
avoidant.
said
Yeah.
avoidant. So
Yeah.
so basically, we're always moving towards secure attachment within ourselves and with someone else. You want to find someone with a secure attachment. So of course you want to work on your own secure attachment. A love addict and a codependent are often anxious attachments. Because they are afraid of abandonment, they're afraid of being rejected, they get insecure when the person doesn't contact them constantly or affirm them constantly. And then you can be a love addict and you can be sort of an anxious and avoidant. You can be like, you want someone to come to you, and then when they come to you, you move them, you'd be like, oh no, go away. And that's sort of an avoidant. So I always say, really, it doesn't mean you're going to right off the bat be a secure attachment. This is stuff you're always working towards. But certainly toxic relationships are generally these anxious attachment styles or avoidance styles. I wouldn't say every narcissist is an avoidant, but many narcissists deep down are avoidants. And yet, when you look at a narcissist and a codependent love addict, they both really have severe abandonment issues. They just manifest it differently. The love addict, it's how it presents, right? The love addict, or the codependent wants to be needed, and then the toxic person has this narcissistic supply of attention that they need from that other person. So they're a magnet for each other. So a lot of these attachment styles collide, they find each other. It's amazing how the universe brings people together to fit these styles.
People listening right now are going to be at different spectrums here. The telltale signs that everybody has is going to be slightly different when it comes to unhealthy relationships. Are there ways in which a person, like right this second, they can identify what some of those unhealthy patterns are? It doesn't mean it's perhaps an unhealthy relationship, but unhealthy dynamics that are created. Are there ways in which you can teach us right in the moment how to be mindful of that? So as we kind of do an analysis of our relationships, we can be like, that's something I need to tighten up.
Well, I can say this. If you're worried that because we're talking about obsessive relationships, probably about love addiction. I can say this, that generally when you first meet someone, you fall in love and you think about them constantly. And I would say you think about them constantly, but then it kind of morphs into more like calm. But if you're someone who's really obsessive or a love addict, you're going to fantasize about them all the time. You're going to fantasize about a future. You're going to overwhelm partners with attention. You're going to feel it's your responsibility to fix them, make them perfect. And you're not going to be your authentic self. You're going to always try to change them. You're going to be hyper vigilant, overreact to the slightest signs that your partner's not interested in you. You're going to feel empty and a great loss or sense of unworthiness if you're not in a relationship. So those are the signs you want to look for if you are in a obsessive sort of relationship. But healthy relationships are slow and steady. They take time. They're nurturing. There's a secure attachment. There's honesty. There's great communication. You're not afraid of confrontation. You can talk things out. So I think that was what you asked.
Exactly. And it is important. Yeah, because there are a lot of people that's listening right now who have great relationships, but it is good to see how some of those blind spots that we all have can creep into the relationship. And so it's good to hear what you're saying as far as if there's an overreaction, over connection to something. It's good to be aware of that, because if not, perhaps that's the foundation for something that could grow into an unhealthy pattern.
And this isn't to say if you're discovering, oh God, he has some of these traits, or I have some of these traits. Maybe it's a good time to talk to someone, a couples therapist, kind of figure out what's going on. Maybe these things you didn't realize, and now you're hearing me talk about it, and it's like, oh wow, is that me? Mostly my audience, generally, when I'm on these shows, are people that are out there in the single world, or in the dating digital world, so a lot of this applies to that, I would say.
I was reading in your media kit, you talk a lot about the downfalls of this obsession relationship. So let's say I'm in a relationship with someone, and this person, I'm not able to fix this person. This person doesn't necessarily want that. And all of a sudden my role has changed. There's a downside that you talk about as far as the not ability to be able to fix a person. And how would that affect my self-esteem and my value in that relationship?
Well, are you saying what are the downsides to being in an obsessive relationship? Is that? So
essentially thanks for asking for the clarification. If I'm in this relationship and I'm not able to fix the other person, I'm not able to show up the way that I think they want me to, and the person's like, slow down, I'm good. There's a downside to that. And all of a sudden my value and my worth, because I'm trying to be with this person, all of a sudden it has a blowback on me. What does it do to the person the anxious person who is trying to fix a person, but they don't have that value, they don't have that role they can be in?
Well, first of all, if you have no value and you have no self-esteem and you're trying to fix somebody else, that's going to be a dead end right there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to work on those issues in order to be in a healthy relationship. The downside of being in any of these kind of toxic relationships is that you could end up in a very abusive relationship. We saw that a lot with the COVID. You end up in very incompatible relationships. You end up fearing that your spouse might abandon you. You lack the independence. If they do leave, you're worried that the site, if you leave, then you may start to cycle again and just, kind of, what do they say? Rinse, repeat, the same type of relationship again.
Yeah.
You're going to be also, these are the things that are going to happen to you if you don't work on yourself. You're going to be easy prey for manipulative, selfish people who recognize their extreme need to take advantage of you. And obsession just will lead you to lie to yourself. You're going to deny your truth. I mean, all of this is just going to be a downward spiral. That's why we're always trying to work on ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think also just, what does they say? The better the evil I know versus the evil I don't know. I mean, I probably mess it up. But if you have it, I think sometimes when people have the awareness that, this isn't a healthy relationship, but perhaps this is all I'm worth, or all I'm good, or this is all I'll be able to have. Or there's other aspect is, I just don't want to break up with this person. I don't have to do this again. So sometimes I think we do stay because we are fearful of finding someone that isn't going to. Exactly. And I think that's such a difficult struggle for many people, is because we do often settle for that because, like we said, either your value or just that sense of, I don't want to have to go through that again. So sometimes
it's not fun out there. I mean, I've been dating on and off my whole life. It's, it's not easy, but it's I'd rather do that than, they say you're much lonelier with the wrong person than being on your own. And I absolutely believe that 100%. You gotta walk through the pain. See, people just want to avoid the pain. I wanted to avoid the pain. I did not want to feel the pain of being on my own. I had to be partnered up. And I get that. And, that's why I'm doing the work I'm doing. I want people to not feel ashamed. There are reasons that you feel this way. What was your background about? What was your, what is your early trauma? When people discover that I was premature, I was in an incubator, that's where my abandonment issues began. They're like, oh God, I can relate. So take a look at what are your issues? Why do you keep settling for less? Why do you have to be coupled up in order to be happy? Sure, everybody wants to be in love. Love is a great thing if it's the right partner, but you can also be really happy on your own. You can really look at your life and go, wow, I have a great life. With or without a partner, I have a great life.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful reframe. And also that self-reliance and self-value is important, because when you being able to really be mindful of who you are and be appreciative of who you are, that's definitely something you can give your partner as well. You're talking about the aspects of the trauma, if people can relate with that. Sometimes there's trauma bonding. Do you want to speak more about what trauma bonding is? Because once again, we can put a label to something. People say, okay, that's something I can be mindful of.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's 3 different kinds of trauma bonding. There's the kind of trauma bonding where you meet someone and you have similar traumas that you can relate to. When I think of my ex-alcoholic husband, we both had very severe abandonment issues, and that kind of bonded us together. And then there's the other type of trauma bond where, let's say you had very neglectful parents, they were abandoning. Siblings become trauma bonded because you didn't really have great caregivers. So you become bonded to your siblings. The trauma bond in terms of a toxic relationship is being with someone who there are all these highs and lows. There's all this like love bombing. You're the greatest thing since salami. And then the next minute they're devaluing you and discarding you. Or one minute they're criticizing you. The next minute they're avoiding you. Or one minute they're telling you how great you are, or they're stonewalling you. Or one minute they're telling you you're the greatest thing again. And then they're going back to maybe the silent treatment. So there's this cycle of up and down in the relationship. You actually get addicted. You actually have peptides that you get addicted to that trauma. And so it becomes very hard to walk away because you're always waiting for them to love bomb you again. You're like always waiting for those feel good feelings of, oh, he loves me and he thinks I'm great and he's validating me and he thinks I'm the best thing in the world. And so you get stuck in this trauma bond, and it's very, very hard to get out. Yeah. That's why they say I was just going to say, that's why if you are with someone toxic and you are in a severe trauma bond, they recommend no contact. when you break it.
Which makes a lot of sense because that will repeat the cycle, especially if you're waiting for that person to love bomb you again. And that's that little bit of hope, that little glimmer of hope always unfortunately keeps us in a healthy pattern because we're like, dude, I'm waiting for that, to have that feeling again. And unfortunately that does just keep us in
You're waiting for them to throw you a bone again, and they will, and then they'll take it away.
Yeah. Yep. It's unfortunate. And so hopefully my listeners and viewers that are hearing this right now recognize that your value and worth is something you give yourself. It's something that nobody else can give you. Unfortunately, Sherry, our time is up. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I had so much fun. If my listeners want to find out more information about you and to work with you and to be a part of this Wake Up Recovery group and all the amazing things you're doing, I know you have some free downloads you're going to give us as well. Where will they find all this information online?
Well, first off, James, thank you for giving me this platform. I'm really grateful too, and I'm grateful for the work you're doing, and congratulations to all of your success. I have a free ebook, Narcissistic Partners and Obsessive Love, and they can get that at sherrygaba.com/NP quiz. That's SherrygABA.com/NP quiz. And that is a free ebook. And then also, if they want to join my program for your listeners, it's $1. It's called Wake Up Recovery, and it's to help people healing from love addiction, codependency, and a toxic relationship. And that is very easy to go to wakeuprecovery.com/IG1, wakeuprecovery.com/IG1. And thank you for putting it in your show notes if you're listening to the podcast.
Yes, my pleasure. My listeners, I highly endorse Sherry. She does not need that from me, but I highly endorse her, all the work that she does. If you do want to find more information about you and you don't remember where it is, simply go to the show notes at jamesmillerlifeology.com, and I will link you all with Sherry's amazing work, and you can download that free workbook as well. Sherry, once again, thank you so much for being a fantastic guest on our show today.
Thank you.